Starting. All right. Hi, everybody. This is Nick Nessel here. I'm a CommCare Technical Project Manager at Debugger. And I just want to cover two things today that are two new features in CommCare that I think are super, super useful for anyone that's building CommCare apps, especially if you're trying to debug things. I really think everyone should know about these features and be using them almost every day. So the first one is the CommCare app preview, and the second one is what I would call the debugger, which is an evaluate XPath expression. These are going to help you in CommCare quite a bit. And so what I'd like to do is walk through two use cases of an actual example of using these features in CommCare. And so as my first example for the app preview, I have a basic registration form that I've created here, which probably a lot of folks have created. It does just some simple things like registering the mother's name, recording the date of birth, and then asking about danger signs. And once these questions have been answered, we have some logic that goes through for calculating when the follow-up should happen and if the referral is necessary for walking through the referral logic. And so I have actually a couple bugs in this form right now, and I want to show how we can use the app preview and how we can use the evaluate XPath to find those bugs a lot faster than we used to be able to in CommCare. So the first thing to show is I'm over on the left-hand side and I'm clicking Show App Preview, which basically, instead of having to deploy this to my phone, it brings up this nice app preview screen here, which simulates what it would look like on a phone. I can click this button in the bottom right and simulate the layout of a smaller phone or simulate the layout of a tablet. I can choose which user I would like to log in as to simulate their experience. So in this case, I'm being a demo user. And be careful here because this is submitting live data. So anything I do in this screen is as if I've done it from a phone. And so if I update a case, it will actually update a case in real life. So that's something that's important to know as well. So I'm going to open my registration form. And you can see this layout is a little bit different than what would be on the phone because all the questions are on one screen. But it still shows me all the questions and helps me debug the logic. So the logic that I have built into this form right now is I would write the mother's name as Jane. I would record her date of birth. And so for Jane, I'm recording that she was born in 1990. So that would make her, I think, 27 years old. And for her danger signs, I'll say that she has a fever. And so you can see in this form, I actually have some calculations going on that's calculating if she's high risk or not, and also suggesting when is the next time I should follow up with her. So in this case, based on what I filled out, it's high risk in 3 days. That result is actually not correct. And if I look at the logic that I want to build into this app, this is what I've defined ahead of time of the branching logic of this app and how I should determine if she's high risk and when the follow-up should be, and also when to refer. So here I can see if I just filled out she was 27 years old, so she's less than 30 years old, and I filled out her danger sign was fever, and so my logic should be that the follow-up is in 7 days and that she's high risk. But when I come to my app, I actually see she is high risk, but the follow-up is in 3 days. And so I know I've done something wrong in my logic here that I've built because this is calculating incorrectly. So previously before app preview, I'd kind of have to stop here, go back and click through all of my logic to see exactly where I'd done the thing wrong. And I have these great big if statements and who knows where the problem is. But what I can do now by virtue of this app preview, if you look in the bottom right corner here, I can click this kind of grid icon and it brings up the data preview screen. And this actually shows me what all of the calculations are in my form in real time. So you can see at the top, this is all the things I've answered in the form. But then at the bottom, all of these hidden values that I have, it's actually showing me the current values in there. So I can see the follow-up date that's being calculated is here. I can see risk status is being calculated as high risk. I can see the follow-up days is 3 days and the age. And this is probably where our problem is, right? It's calculating at 822 years old. And so rather than having to go through and click on age and read that and see if I got it right, and rather than having to go through and click on risk status and read through each one of these things, I can come here and see, oh, here's my problem. Age is calculating wrong. And sorry, I should have done this before. Most of you will be using the easy references, so we see the logic in these nice bubbles instead. So I've identified here pretty quickly, oh, my problem is my age calculation is wrong. I come to my age calculation, and hopefully you guys can see what's wrong. I'm dividing by 12 here instead of, so that's actually the age in months. So I was able to just quickly identify here's where the issue was, and maybe what I should do is instead update that to divide by 365 days a year, and that will give me the age in years. But what do I want to do if I'm not sure if that's correctly? If that's actually working correct, what we could do is instead, or actually, sorry, I'll skip that. But what I'll do right now is I'll just save this change. And once I've saved it, you can see the red icon comes at the bottom of the screen, which tells me I've made a change to my app. If I click that, everything that I've saved has just been reloaded into this app, and the new logic is in there now. And I can come right back in without having to make a deploy and check again. So now if I go back and I say that this woman again was born in 1990, and I say she has a fever, I can see my logic is correct now. It's high risk in a 7-day follow-up. And I can see that my age is calculating correctly now at 27.02. So that kind of shows you just like the power of the app preview and the power of the data preview within it. And I think this saves you tons and tons and tons of time, because there's no more like creating a deploy, sending it to your phone, and seeing if you got it right. And then if you got it wrong, you have to do that whole process again. This allows you to see exactly kind of where your problems are without having to figure out how to dive into the logic. But there's actually another feature in here that is even more powerful, which helps for a bit more advanced users as well. And that's if we click on the top right, it's called the Evaluate XPath option. So right now we're looking at the form data, but we also have the option to come here and evaluate an XPath expression. And I can just type in any expression I'd like into this box, and CommCare will tell me if I got it right or wrong, and it will tell me what the answer of that expression is. And so if I type in a simple expression like today, it will immediately show me the answer is 2017, April 12th. And if I say, what is today minus 50 days, I can see 50 days ago is this, which is like a date format. And if I know why is that showing a number, I can quickly type date around it, and I can convert that to date. And these are all just CommCare functions, but I'm able to just type them in right here, and CommCare is immediately telling me, like, did I type this right or wrong? And if I had an error, so maybe I missed a parentheses or something, it's going to tell me that I've missed that error and what's wrong with that expression, which is going to allow me, again, instead of having to test that on my phone, I can quickly type in all the expressions I want here and see what CommCare will evaluate it to. So the way that this is really powerful in app building is, what if I wanted to test this age calculation condition that I have, and I wasn't sure that 365 was the right thing to do? What I can do is copy this expression over into the editor. So I've pasted in here. Now this is a key part, and I think if we all ask enough, we might be able to get our developers to help us out and change it. But right now this is going to error because we're using these bubbles here for date of birth, and so the evaluator doesn't recognize it. So what you have to do first is come to this option here, go to your form properties, and turn off the easy references just for when you want to paste these things over into the evaluate part. And you can see what that did was it turned that bubble into actual text that CommCare understands, where it says data and date of birth, which is how this question, that date of birth question, is actually referenced. And so when I do that, I evaluate that expression. It now shows me exactly what it is. And you can see this is actually based on what is written in the form. So if I go back and I change the date in my form, if I close this here, and I say instead of this woman being born in 1990, if she was born in 1980, I can go back to where I was for the evaluation before. And when I press evaluate again, it now updated and showed me 37. So this is super, super powerful. You can put in any expressions here. And once you get it working how you want to have it working, and you think, yes, that's the logic I want, you can copy this and paste it back over into your calculation, and you know it's correct, and you've saved it. And you've done all that debugging without having to create like a deploy and without having to send it back to the phone. And you can see when I press save, again, it's warning me, hey, you made a change. You might want to update this app preview. So that's the app preview, and that's kind of the basic version for how to use the app preview to quickly debug your apps. This second part now is there's actually one more. This is more directed towards advanced users who are writing more advanced XPath functions. And there's one more bit in here that is going to help even more. And so I'm going to go through my second example now. Back still in the same registration form. The woman's name is Jane. I'm going to still use my example that she was born in 1990, so she's 27 years old. And I'm going to specify that she has a fever. So if we look down at the next part of our app, we can see that it says, this woman has a risky pregnancy. Do you want to refer her? And we have logic that I've tried to build in here that says, if we look on the left-hand side, or on the right-hand side, actually, she's under 30. She has a danger sign of a fever. So what I want to have happen is for her to be referred to a regional hospital. And if her danger signs are just cough or fatigue, which is mild risk, I would want her to be referred to a district hospital. And so this is showing an example of, I've written a bunch of XPath functions here to reference the location hierarchy, which a lot of times you'll have to do when you're creating more complex applications. And let's see how this logic works. So again, I've said this woman is high risk, and so she should be suggested to be referred to a regional hospital. When I select that she's in the Bredasdorp village, what should be happening here is this woman should be referred to a regional hospital, but the actual answer that's coming out here is a district hospital. And so again, I know there's something wrong with the logic that I've written here in my app. And I want to be able to debug this logic without having to make a whole bunch of builds. In this case, though, unlike the kind of simple example, you can see the logic here is quite a bit more complex. There's a lot of different references to instances and locations. Probably everyone at some point has had to type in something like this, maybe something like referring to the CommCare session or the case DB. And a lot of times it's, someone either on the CommCare users or one of the groups has like sent you an email, or you've seen on the Confluence page, like just paste this code in and it'll work. And like half the times when someone tells you to do that, like it doesn't work and you don't know why, and it's this complex logic. But we can use this app preview to also debug something more complex like this. And so let's go back into our menu. And again, I'm going down into my evaluate XPath. I can paste this big thing into my evaluate XPath and see what it evaluates to first. And I can see right now it is evaluating the district hospital, which I don't want. So there's actually three pieces to this logic, and this is where the power of this comes in, is what this is an if statement. And it says if this value is high risk, then return this great big XPath expression. Otherwise, with the comma, return this great big expression. And so I'm assuming there's something wrong with one of these two expressions, and I have no idea how to debug it, right? Instance, locations, locations, location, ID equals this. It's pretty difficult to understand. But even if I don't understand it, what I can do is I can just highlight the bit of the thing that I want to see what happens. So what I'm doing right now is highlighting just the one part of the if statement. And if I click evaluate selection, it shows me what just that highlighted bit evaluates to, which is the district hospital. But if I come and I select this, this is what's supposed to evaluate when someone is high risk. And so this should be a regional hospital if I've written it right. And actually I have written it right. So I can see right now, like, actually these two big instance things that maybe I do or don't understand, they are evaluating to what I'm expecting it to be. So I don't need to look here for what the problem is. Maybe what the problem is this first thing, the first clause in my if statement. And so again, I have said that this woman's high risk, so this statement should evaluate to true, but when I highlight and evaluate it, it evaluates to false. So I can kind of see right now, actually there's nothing wrong with my XPath. It was this here is evaluating to false. Maybe you guys can see what the problem is, but if I want to hunt this down, what I can do is go and look and see, well, what is risk status then? Why is this false? I could just highlight the bit that is the risk status and evaluate that selection. And now I can see the problem. Oh, risk status is actually spelled HIGH risk. And what I've put here is HI risk. And so I haven't made any builds or anything, but I was able to break apart this complex if statement and look at what each piece of that if statement is evaluating to, so I can kind of pinpoint the problem right away. And this saves tons and tons and tons of time. Like if you couldn't do this, it's probably what, 5 builds, and every time you get an error on your phone, and this thing isn't even actually erroring, right? So you won't even get an error message, like your logic just won't work. So I just know if I type in the HIGH there, now evaluate the whole selection and I see the answers right. So great, I've debugged this statement. I copy it from here. Then I can come back to where it's supposed to belong, paste in my new thing with the correct path, save it, hit the refresh with my red button, open that form back up, and let's test the logic again. So again, it's Jane. I'll say she was 1980 this time. What matters is that fever is high risk. I do want to refer. And so now when I choose Bredasdorp, I can see it does go to the regional hospital like I'm expecting. And if I change it to cough, which would be a mild risk, then the reference should have gone back to the district hospital, which it did. So I had a big XPath expression. I saw there was something wrong, and I was able to use that evaluate XPath to pretty quickly get to where the issue was. And so use this a million times. It's going to save you so much time. So yeah, thanks. I'll take questions now. We do have some other CommCare field managers on the line. And so I'll open it up to any questions that any of you have as well. Jump in. And if not, we'll end the video and I'll cut out this embarrassing part where there's no questions. All right, well.
Oh wait, sorry, I have one question. So more to clarify, this is Baron. So when you're in the XPath expression builder and you're testing out things that could be going on in your form, you can do both just general CommCare expressions and also expressions that are contingent on specific questions in the form itself. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It can be either. You can just type in anything you want, or you can type in questions that are specific to the form. So one of the things, if I go here, there's this documentation. A lot of times what you might have to do is write, Maren, could you just mute? You might have to write something that involves one of these session expressions, which happen a lot. So like if you want to know what's the user ID of a person, you can see that's referencing CommCare session user ID. You can come and just type that in, put that in here, and it'll give you that answer. One of the big ones is a lot of times you need to do something with the case DB and reference the case that you've currently selected. Here it is on this documentation here. I'm not sure if this is going to work because this is a registration form and there isn't technically a case ID yet. Yeah, so this would work, but since it's a reg form, there is no case ID. But you can type these things in also, and you can combine them in any way you want. One more just tip for you. Well, if you have questions, jump in. But there's one more tip, which is, I think, super useful, especially for you guys if you're using locations and things like cases. So I'm just going to take just this one bit of the location that I've written here. And what this is doing, it's saying, show me all the locations. Maybe I just want to know, like, what are all the locations that I have here? So I say instance locations. You can do things like write count. So if I say count of locations, this is telling me just how many locations have actually been returned on the phone. And if I want to know, like, villages, for instance, I could say the type equals village, and it's going to tell me how many villages there are if I get my brackets right. And so this is so you can see, like, even if the XPath returns more than one answer, you can say, like, count, and then it'll actually at least give you something meaningful. Because if you don't say count and it returns more than one answer, what it does is it just gives you this big blob of an answer, which is hard to understand. But if you say count, it'll tell you at least how many there are. And then this thing, which is so cool, if you use the join statement, what join does is it takes a list of things and puts something in between them. So, like, if you want to take a list of things and put commas in between them, you would type, like I've typed here, join with a comma this expression. And now, even though it's 5 locations, it is going to return for me the actual names of those locations. And so, like, normally if I didn't have the join, I wouldn't be able to see what those location names are. It would just be that garbage. But when I add the join, it actually lists out what the names are. You may not understand why that's useful right now, but just remember, when you're using this, if at some point you do get this kind of garbage as a response, just say, oh yeah, I'm supposed to put a join around it, and it'll help you out.
Nick, along those lines, how does this work out with repeat groups?
You know, it's a good question. I don't think it does per se. One thing it will do, though, so this evaluate XPath, I don't think you can, I shouldn't answer because I'm not sure. But I'm not sure. I think you could reference it if you had a repeat group here. You should be able to, let me just add one and I'll show you. So when I add a repeat group to my form, and this would be called, like, hospital. And then maybe in the hospital, I would have, like, a text question that says name. I don't know how to do it myself, but I think what you could do is you would type data hospital, and then there would be, like, a bracket, and you would put, like, 1, and that would be, well, I think 0 would be the first time through the repeat thing. So, like, this isn't going to work right now because I haven't saved it, but I think what you do is you would type data hospital, and then, like, in that bracket 0, and that says, like, the first time you've gone through. So if you go through that repeat group 5 times and you want to know what's the third name, you would type hospital 2 name, and it would tell you the third name. But don't quote me on that. I'm not great with repeat groups, but I'm pretty sure something similar to that, if not exactly that, is what you would do to reference stuff in there.
Thanks. I'll definitely investigate further.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nick. That was awesome. I was definitely underutilizing that evaluate XPath thing. One quick comment, or maybe I have a suggestion for a better way to do this. I ran into a situation where I was just, like, trying to test out a bunch of different combinations of questions and how they made a particular, like what the output was of that, of like a complex calculation. And I ended up using web apps, and you can also view the data preview in web apps, in which case you can keep everything open at the same time. And you can watch, like as you click around, you can watch the fields update. Which I don't know if you, here you just have to click back and forth, I think, but I just would share that as for that particular use case was helpful.
That's a really good tip. You know, I hadn't, ever since App Preview got created, I haven't spent much time in web apps at all.
Yeah, and sorry, it only works, I think, if you use web apps as a web, like from logged in as a web user, if that makes sense. Yeah, if you just click on the web apps tab, and then you can still log in as someone else, but that's when it like recognizes that it will show you the data preview.
Oh, really? It's not, so I can't log in as a mobile worker into the web apps?
That's the response I got yesterday. I tried it, and someone said they didn't think that was supported anymore. But if you do it as a web user, then it works.
Okay, well, let's see. I've got 1 second. I'm trying to remember the name of my app. And I'm pretty sure what I did was I just named it Untitled. Yeah, so I have 2 untitled applications here. Well, I'm not going to be able to get it loaded right now. But I know what you mean. Instead of it being on the screen and you have to type this little, click into that little box, instead on the web, you'd have this whole screen and it would show all at once.
Yeah, it's like the bottom half of the screen shows your form data, while the top half is clicking around in form.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have it enabled. I think what I might do is I could try to record an add-on to that just so people see that as well. Does the web apps, do you have to like make a build for web apps to work, or does it work just like App Preview?
I think you have to make a build, but I haven't tested it very carefully.
Okay. Well, I'm running over on time. Anybody else have any questions before we hit the stop on this? All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Oh, I think you're seeing me now.
Thanks,
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm gonna, let's see.